Okay, we're back with Gretchen Carlson and some superstars from the world of tech. We're so excited to have you guys here. Thank you. So let's start out with each of you just introducing yourself, name, and company. We'll start with you, Randy.
Great. Hi, I'm Randy Zuckerberg. I'm the creator of a show, that promotes girls loving STEM and tech, and also the creator of a new restaurant idea called Sue's Tech Kitchen.
Which is an amazing idea, by the way, and will be a huge success, if I can interject. Great to have you here, Randy.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Kayla Sanders. I'm the founder and CEO of Remy. We are a reg tech company that works with insurance companies and financial institutions.
Hi, my name is Ari Horie, CEO and founder of a Women's Startup Lab. We are a Silicon Valley-based startup accelerator for women.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brett Honeycutt. I am the Chief Operating Officer and a co-founder of Wealthsimple, which is an automated investment manager. We launched the company 3 years ago and now serve over 40,000 clients in Canada, the US, and the UK.
Welcome. Thank you all for joining us. So there's been a long-standing discussion about the fact that the numbers of women in tech are low, which has been largely attributed to a systemic discouragement of girls in math and science and education, which is getting a lot of attention now due to STEM-related initiatives. But this problem becomes exponentially more complicated with what we are now understanding to be a kind of culture of harassment in the tech sector as a whole. A recent study found that 60% of women that work in the tech industry have reported unwanted sexual advances. That's just who reports that. That's an incredibly high number. And I'd love to hear from each of you on the culture in tech as it relates to gender. One might assume that because there are so many young people in tech, that it would be a more progressive culture for women. I mean, these are not people that grew up in the Mad Men era. And more to the point, these are the most wealthy, educated, innovative people in the world. So what is at play here?
I guess, sure, I'll jump in. I think it's pretty sad that still my best advice to date for women going into tech is to have a male name like Randy. I can't tell you how many times I emailed someone and they were like, oh, Randy, probably thought it was a guy. So I got a meeting and then I'd show up visible shock on their face when a woman walked into the room, but I was like, too bad, got the meeting. But it's both funny and sad that that's still, my best thoughts and my best advice. To your question about girls, that's something I'm very focused on now with all my business ventures. It is around 3rd grade that we start to lose girls in STEM and tech, saying that's for boys or I'm not good at that. And so I think these are conversations that need to happen early. And if we're talking about losing girls in 3rd grade and then continuing to have women come up against such big roadblocks, I think there's a reason when we talked to Kayla that Kayla and I both left Silicon Valley to move to New York City. And I think it speaks to a little bit of the toxic environment there.
Kayla, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I will say when your gender does not match your venture, it's you have an up-road, battles from day one. So, walking in and people looking at me and saying, like, isn't fashion or like beauty or, are you sure you want to do like regulatory and compliance? It seems like, you don't really match that. But I think what I would challenge people to do is really, as VCs, as consumers, if you're buying a product, if you're buying anything, look at the person who's doing it and the passion that they have for it. And I think, why I left Silicon Valley was a lot because they looked at me and they said, well, it just doesn't make sense in my head. So clearly you're not the best person for that. When for me, I think being a female is a huge competitive advantage in what I do. I think the insurance and the banking and finance clients that we serve, they're sick of the regular old run-of-the-mill, incumbents. And so we have a really unique opportunity as females to come in with a different perspective. And that's where innovation happens and that's how it's created. So I think, to Randy's point, have a boy's name and teach them how being a female or being a minority doesn't matter is your competitive advantage.
So I run a women-focused accelerator, and I know many people want to come to Silicon Valley, and certainly I do encourage them to come. But I also tell them here in the Silicon Valley, super competitive, and if those biases exist, why would you go up against those, the stream? So one of the things I suggest to come to Silicon Valley, create a network, establish whatever you can, but also go out there, right? This digital world, you can go anywhere in the world and then find the money, opportunity. And so use Silicon Valley as a base ground, and also try to go other places that makes you special. And there's a people who's really supporting women, and also women angel investors really looking for the opportunity.
Well, what is the macro picture here? Is this a conscious effort to keep women out of leadership? Is this another generation that is resistant to the idea of gender equality at the top? Because it feels a little bit like a failure on two fronts. One, internally at these companies that are having all these issues, and two, the greater culture in our society that is apparently not ready to see women in positions of power or in leadership, or women as disruptors in the technological world. Can you speak to that? It's a tough one.
First of all, I'd just like to thank Gretchen for including me in this panel, and to acknowledge that I think it can be complicated to speak credibly on these issues as a man about how to improve the workplace for women. So I just want to be sensitive to that as a first point. When thinking about this question in particular about the role of women in tech, I do think that the sort of pipeline issue is a major issue, which is why I think that the work that Randy and others are doing in encouraging girls as well as boys to develop an interest in STEM-related fields is really, really critical in the long term. I also think that there's just a number of challenges inherent to being in an industry that is 80% men, and I think that a number of sort of like patterns and habits develop in an industry that is just numerically weighted so much towards one gender. As an example of that, I think that so much in Silicon Valley happens through networking, which I think is in some ways a good attribute of Silicon Valley. People want to help each other out, but if certain individuals, and men in particular, may have stronger networks in an industry that is 80% men. So I think that we need to take steps as an industry to really understand those systematic elements and correct them.
Have you been surprised to see now the sort of flood of allegations, and Susan Fowler's allegations against Uber resulted in the firing of the founder and CEO, and there's many other women coming forward. As we said, the numbers are really high. Does that surprise you? Do you see it? What's your experience?
I would say that it's very surprising in my own experience. I have mostly worked. I've had the good fortune of working in startups that I've founded, and I've worked with close friends of mine for the last 7 years. And I think when it comes to that sort of thing, we have a zero tolerance policy at Wealthsimple. But I think that one of the I think we really need to be thoughtful as we grow our company from 100 people to hopefully one day soon 1,000 people or 10,000 people, and to put the right structures in place that will be able to detect this sort of behavior and root it out.
Gretchen, you had a comment?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that originally when we were putting this party together and this forum, that I really wanted to have this discussion about what's going on in the tech world, and I wanted to have a party with a purpose, and really take this head on. Susan Fowler reached out to me after she wrote her blog and said, if you wouldn't have done what you did, I don't know if I would have done what I did. And I thought that was just so important, because then she inspired, like we were talking about earlier, that chain of inspiration. She inspired so many other people as well. I do think we need to pay close attention to what's happening in college with boys, young men, and what are we teaching them there that they're transferring then into the real world, and especially in male-dominated fields where they maybe feel more at ease at carrying on that kind of behavior. And the last point that I just want to make is that Randy and I actually met because we were supporting a female entrepreneur. I've been doing angel investing only in female-run companies, and I feel that it's incredibly important to support women who are going outside of the realm of normalcy and starting venture capitalist firms. And we hope that particular company that we met through is a huge success, but I'm investing in others too, and only ones in tech that are being run by women.
I think it's really important what you were saying. I think a lot of women don't feel like they have the power to speak up. They feel like maybe they're pitching a VC and the person who has the money holds the power. So that's why I think you speaking up, Susan speaking up, gives women power. I think certainly we have to speak up against egregious things, egregious crimes, but I think it's also important to speak up about the little things too. I do a lot of investing in startups, and I recently had a few friends of mine started a fund and asked me if I would invest in their fund, and I looked at them and I said, you know what? I think you guys are going to make great decisions. You're going to make a lot of money, but I cannot invest in you because there's no female partner on your team. Wow. And it's my money. I can do what I want with it. I can speak. I can make I can make a statement. And so I think maybe even for women out there who don't feel like they have the power to stand up with their voice, so you have the power with your money. You have the power with a lot of decisions and what you do.
Well, let's talk more about that. All right, this one goes out to you first, and then everyone chime in. But while women entrepreneurs may bypass a boss or a manager that would harass them, they are being serially harassed by investors and VCs, many who have come forward recently. And they're taking advantage of the fact that these women need funding to get their businesses started. And it's really a double loss for them if they resist, rebuff, or report it. Not only do they not get any funding, but they can be blackballed if people decide to retaliate. Can you talk a little bit about that? Start with, and then Ari, and then Kayla.
Yeah, it is really hard position. When I started Women's Startup Lab, I had my own experience of getting a text from some male engineer saying, when are you going to give me a blowjob? And I was shocked. And eventually I moved my tech team to offshore to prevent that kind of interaction. And I started Women's Startup Lab, then what I found out was I was thinking it was something about me that created that sort of misunderstanding. And I found out that every single entrepreneur who came through had similar or worse situation. One day, one of the entrepreneurs even came and said, Ari, would you mind to create a hackathon or a job where I can find an engineer? And it was interesting why she asked me. And the way she said was just odd. So I said, what's going on? She said, well, every time I find an engineer, they are interested in getting my patents, and I keep losing engineers. And so she said, if Women's Startup Lab hosts some event, then I will have an engineer that is right mind. So that was one. The other one was a number of cases where they have potential investor, they're in the conversation, not just the initial conversation, but they already went into quite further in raising funds. So 6 months of just a 24/7 sort of hours. And at the last minute, lead investor asked her to go into the room to sign the document. And at the end, she refused and she lost the deal. So, what I'm seeing is, one, we can speak up about it, and I certainly encourage, but also I want us to men to also speak up about it. And let's not put everything on women. We already been asking a lot of women to do more and more, and we are doing a lot more. And I think we need the men to speak up about it, and also, if they choose not to speak up right now, they should have a choice, because they're also responsible for the company and also their employees' entire families' life depending on them. So sometimes you have to wait around timing, but it's very challenging situation, I think. It's an important topic to talk about, yes.
So I would say, as a female founder, Silicon Valley was an interesting experience for me. It does take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy to go pitch people and talk to people and network. There are funds that are far more female friendly. I think I find the ones that are, and they don't necessarily have a female partner. I tend to be drawn to funds that do. I think they just they understand a little bit more. They're able to associate with kind of me in general and the things that I go through as a leader a little bit better. But New York has been a place where I've found the most support. I think finding that support system and finding other female entrepreneurs who can say, hey, go this way, stay away from those guys. And I think we do have a lot of power. And being able to share our stories and say, I had a horrible experience with this VC, I'm going to share that. And I will share that. And if you come to me and you are and there's any type of experience like that, I'm not afraid to tell others about that and prevent them from coming your way, because that's the only way that we have a chance, right? Or else we're wasting a ton of time going to places where we're not going to move forward. So, find good female founders that you can really use as a network and share with them. And they'll, I think that we help guide journeys, and that's what we're here to do. So.
It's interesting because Silicon Valley has made its name by creating the most universal technology platforms that are intended to solve the world's problems. but it has really struggled in inclusion and diversity. What if you took an engineer's mind to this problem? What would be the solution? How do we get this to end?
Blind interviews like they do with some orchestras. I think when you take all the bias out, there's actually a lot of research that shows that some code written by women actually is better received. And I think if we did a lot more of that blind hiring and implemented those processes, we'd see more women.
I have his thoughts. I think right after the college, those young male, or women, they had spent time at the dormitory. And so for investor, they want somebody young, smart, they don't need to sleep, pizza, beer, cheap feeding, they work around the clock. And, you know, I can't say every single VC want that, but that's something that they want to see part of it. And so I feel like Silicon Valley continue to promote that flat boy culture, having a beer, having a beer 24 hours and free food and a volleyball court and beanbag and the Legos and Star Wars. So it's actually promote them to stay like kids and work like no tomorrow, which is good. But on the other hand, we don't provide the opportunity for them to look back, what's happening behind them, which is other women engineers, they don't feel included, and they continue to work and talk like college student. And I think there's some sort of unsaid expressed, this flat boy culture has to be shifted to really call everybody to grown up in a certain level.
Yeah. So what's the biggest piece of advice I'd love to hear quickly from all of you, for that 24 to 25-year-old female executive who's either building her business from scratch or working in tech and encounters gender bias or sexual harassment and is afraid to do anything for fear that it will derail her entire career? What do you tell that girl, woman?
Oh, gosh. I want to echo something that Kayla said, which is I think we spend a lot of time in our careers searching for mentors that are 5 levels above us who can save us when we have problems and guide our careers. I think I found in my career my best mentors are right around me, are my peers. Those are the people who will stand up for you when things go wrong, who will support you, who will promote you, who will be real and honest with you. So I wish more people would spend time cultivating their peer mentorship network because those are the people you can really lean on in these situations.
So I think the hardest part for me in building a company was far more the emotional and mental part of it than actually building a product and finding people to buy it. So surround yourself with people who lift you up and do not bring you down, because that will be the single thing that derails you from reaching your goal.
For me, when you're young, you tend to think you don't know a lot, and you tend to look up and listen to those advices. I wish many of us tell them that they are already perfect and they have every decision that they can make to build the company, even though they are young. So believe and trust their gut. Something is not right. Walk away, even though someone has power and money and influence. Trust that you're gonna get there because you're so smart, and you don't need to rely on those people. Yes, yeah.
I would say, find mentors you trust. I think that's really the key for success in this industry. And obviously, if there's a particular case of harassment, then you need to really have someone you trust to be able to tell that about and get their advice.
Great, thank you. All right, one more question, and I'm going to direct this to Gretchen. Did things change from this moment on? Because one aspect that's concerning, I'll just use Hollywood as an example, is that there are so many people that are guilty of sexual harassment, but they're not getting called out because they are still in positions of power. And the whistleblower has so much to lose. So Weinstein is called out over and over and over because he's no longer a perceived threat. But what about everyone else? Is this a tipping point?
I think so. I mean, I think if you've harassed in the past, you're shuddering in your boots right now. You're worried that women have a voice, and so that's a good thing. And I would just echo in the tech world, I think that as a society and a culture, we should demand that the percentage of women employees increases. It's abominable that 20% of these companies are female. Listen, my daughter has an amazing STEM lab at her school. You know all about it, Nancy. Your daughters go there too. And there are girls doing amazing things. They're smart. They have the American dream in their grasp. And the idea that we are only hiring 20% of them at these companies is outrageous. So I think as a country, we should demand that more women be allowed to work in these places. Because what I have found out through my research in Be Fierce is that when you have more women working, in fact, when you have predominantly women working in a company, guess what doesn't happen? Sexual harassment. It doesn't happen. So let's even the playing field once and for all.
Thank you, Gretchen. That's a great place to start. Thank you so much to this panel for joining us, and Gretchen at this inflection point in history. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Nancy.